It's easy to hear your favorite artist on WFPK from wherever you are. Listen on your smart speaker, live stream from our website at WFPK.org from Louisville Public Media.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making your way here, checking out this series. Always appreciate it. If you're not already, I hope you hit that subscribe button. You know how these things go. We ask. Hopefully you do. Hopefully you like what you hear enough to hit it, though. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, a brand new interview every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so it is a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists, discover some new ones, know what's happening in the music world. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, Podchaser, NPR.org, YouTube for the video versions, or anywhere you get your podcasts from. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today, my guest, Ben Schneider of the band Lord Huron. They're back with a brand new record called Long Lost. It's a concept album. Let's see, sort of about a fictional band lost in time, the studio that they actually do record in, and the ghosts that live there. Ben's going to tell us about taking some cues from late night public access shows and old time variety shows, how the passage of time and blurring memories play such a big role in the lyrics, and the eternal chain reaction that we're all part of. It's a pretty great, deep conversation on a magnificently deep, beautiful album. Beyond all of that, Ben's also going to discuss the responsibility the band feels to listen to their fans' deepest questions, especially that go along with stuff that comes on this record, paranormal and otherwise. His desire to create some graphic novels and movies to go along with the music, and being musically inspired by an artist that we're both big fans of, Lee Hazlewood. That's all in here. Let's do this. Talking about the record Long Lost. It's Kyle Meredith with Lord Huron.
Hey there.
I got to compliment you. I guess that's where I want to start, because Long Lost, it's incredible, man. I mean, what a unique piece of art that you have made here.
Wow, thank you. That's really nice to hear. Thank you so much. It's been such a long process waiting for it to come out. You know, you tend to lose perspective, so it's nice to hear someone who's heard it say a good thing about it. Thank you.
There's a lot of entry points into this, but it's a concept album in a way, and part of that is about, I guess, the recording studio that you all are in, Whispering Pines, but with this fictional character, Mr. Tarbell, and you as the band, who some of these people may or may not be ghosts, I guess.
Yeah.
Where did this concept come from, if you could paint the picture for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you mentioned, our studio is this place that we call Whispering Pines, and we've been working there for about 7 years, recorded the last 3 records there. And it's like, in addition to being our studio, it's our clubhouse too. You know, it's where we hang out, and we've shot some videos there and really made use of the space. It's this beautiful old studio built sometime in the 70s, kind of the style they don't make them anymore. You know, beautiful acoustic treatment and glass control booth and a big tracking room. And somehow we got lucky. We were looking for a place to work and found this on Craigslist. The owners of it are not in the music business and kind of didn't know what to do with it. You know, it's so specific and custom built that you can't just turn it into a restaurant or anything like that, or an office. So we got a great deal on it, and we kind of had to gut it. It had been abandoned for 20 years or so. So it was, all the gear was outdated, and it was in kind of a rough state, but we had fun converting it over. It's kind of an ongoing process, but yeah. So anyway, we've kind of always wondered about the history of it. We know a few of the people who've worked there, but there's kind of a lot of question marks, and we kind of just have invented it over the years, or made up characters that we imagined passing through there. It's got a real haunted feeling in there. You know, late at night when we're working, sometimes you feel like you're not alone. And yeah, so we kind of wanted this record to sound as though we're channeling these old ghosts that live there, almost like this is a long lost classic from some other dimension. You know, there's familiar elements to it, but you can't quite put your finger on it. It's almost like you're hearing somebody else's memories or something, which was, you know, maybe a lofty goal, but you know, we shoot the moon, so hopefully hopefully we got close to that.
You certainly did, or at least, to me anyway. Thinking about it like that, I mean, wanting to write a long lost classic, what do you have to do as a writer to approach something with that sort of thought in mind?
Something I learned from our first record was it's useful for me anyway to create sort of avatars to write through. So almost to coming up with characters who I can try to inhabit. I mean, I don't know. It's weird because it's all it's all generated within, but it seems like you'd be able to do that without having to go through the trouble of, of making names up and everything. But I don't know. I guess it's background. It's like for me to flesh out these characters and write their stories first, and give them names and personalities, and then try to inhabit that as much as I can, channel that. That's kind of been my strategy, and I guess I started learning about that on our first record, Lonesome Dreams, where we created this fictional author, George Ranger Johnson, who had written all these adventure stories, and we kind of used him as our avatar in that first record. And it's something we've kind of done on all the records at this point, but I guess never more so literally as we are now, where I'm literally trying to sing from the perspective of somebody else who's not even real.
Well, the character that we do get to see a lot, of course, in the online videos with Mr. Tarbell. Am I saying the name right?
Yeah, Tubbs Tarbell.
Yeah.
Tubbs Tarbell. I like how you give it a little French flair with your emphasis. That's nice.
It's that Louisville thing. We're technically named after a French town, and we don't say it anything like they do. So I'm making up for it. When I first saw him, I started thinking about the old local networks and public access shows of like the 60s, even through really the 90s. I think they hung around before the internet really kind of squashed all of that stuff. But you would have these these folks in these middle parts of nowhere Texas, nowhere Kentucky, wherever, and would just be talking fire and brimstone, but at the same time celestial bodies and whatnot. Like I'd wondered if they even knew they were even being creepy, because it was they were intense.
Yeah.
Like did you I had to wonder, did you have any of that on your mind? Was any of that sort of influential in creating a character like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really love that aesthetic of those late night broadcasts, whether it's radio or television, public access, but also kind of combining that with the old variety shows, Porter Wagner and Lawrence Welk even, and all that stuff. Like, we kind of wanted to make our own version of all that with a little bit of sort of it's kind of a weird reference, but I was thinking a bit about some of the shows I watched growing up, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, that kind of stuff, just because there was such a sense of wonder and sort of delight. I don't know. And the format allows you to do anything. Like, you can talk about science, you can make jokes, you can get emotional, and you can kind of have a lot of whimsy. And I think that suits our sense of humor and our sensibilities in general really well. But also giving it that we can't do anything without having the creepy vibe as well. So that was a crucial part of it too.
I love that balance. But you've also talked about, I think in another interview, maybe there still needs to be a point, you say, of getting to a truth. Like, even with all this fictional moments and awesome creepiness, like, what is the truth in this concept that you're approaching?
Well, I guess in terms of the sort of themes and actual lyrical content, I always like to start somewhere that's a situation that I've been through or been familiar with in one way or another, close to. I think that's the only way I can really get started on a song, is coming from some place that feels true to me, and then I'm able to sort of fictionalize it, I think, to get at it from different angles, or to maybe enhance some of the drama of it in one way or another. So yeah, it's got to start with a kernel of truth, or else I think it'll ring false right out of the gate, at least for me. I know there's other writers who are probably better at expressing that and making it feel real, but it's interesting with music, because since it is coming from me and from my mouth, straight from me, I feel like it only rings true if there's a bit of truth behind it all.
And then taking what you just said right there, and so I'll bring up the first single with Not Dead Yet. Like, here's a moment, when I go into it and I start thinking, where are these metaphors? And then considering the conceptual, theme of the whole thing, I think, or am I supposed to be taking all of this quite literally? not dead yet. No, this is the character side of it. This is the fictional, literal side of it. Like where is that line for you where metaphor crosses over with literal?
Yeah, I mean, it varies from song to song, and honestly, that one is kind of one of the most literal literal ones probably. I remember starting to write that at a low point in touring. We love being on the road, but it definitely wears on you, and there are certain points where you feel alienated, not just from the people around you, but kind of from yourself. And that's what that song is about. Is just looking at yourself in the mirror and having that sensation of a stranger looking back at you. And yeah, just how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that when you feel like you don't even like the person you see in the mirror? So it's kind of heavy, but I thought setting it to a jaunty beat and a familiar chord progression might take a little bit of the sting out.
And then you get the first two lines. I mean, there are so many songs that are sort of experiencing this right now, but those first two lines end up becoming reflective of the quarantine if you need them to be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny how much of this record, it was mostly or pretty much entirely written before the pandemic hit, but I think that, we certainly wasn't conceived as a pandemic record, but I think a lot of stuff will be colored by context, stuff that was created in this period of time. And definitely the themes we're dealing with, I mean, things being lost to time, things never being able to be the way they were, not being able to get out into the world, as in that song. Yeah, I think those things will resonate with people in terms of what's going on right now, for sure.
And time, I mean, it plays all over this. I mean, time seems like it does play such a big role in lyrics and song titles. And I mean, we're left with a nearly 10-minute ethereal piece called Time's Blur. And this is where the real, like, what the fuck is happening sets in. Because up until then, I felt like I had a handle on the what was going on in this story. But what are we left with? Let's start with that 10-minute piece, Time's Blur. Where does that leave us in the story?
So that actually was the one thing that was developed once the pandemic had hit. And I hadn't thought about that yet, but I guess maybe that was more colored than anything else by the times. But really for me, that's just kind of wrapping up. So if you imagine all the songs that came before are these sort of long lost classics, and the way I created that last track was just taking elements from those recordings and stretching them out, slowing them down with tape and in other ways, and just kind of blurring them. And what it's meant to represent is the passage of time and how our remembrances are blurred, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like, I was thinking about how it could just change things. I guess I wasn't trying to judge that time's blur, but more just represent how it modifies things in our minds. So yeah, this last track is bits from each of the songs that preceded it, imagined through time's blur.
That's interesting. I obviously would not have picked up on the it actually being actual pieces from the songs. There's there's a line in the online letter that Mr. Tarbell wrote, and he said, I think it was from that. He said, "Time washes away what man creates," and that's a hell of a line to begin with.
Yeah. It all originates from Tubbs, but I actually had my brother write a lot of that. A couple of writers contributed to that letter, but my brother wrote that line, and I think he had a good handle on what I was trying to say through the album. And that one really resonated with me too. But it's interesting how it can live on in a way too. It's almost like different people pick up that note and continue it, and that's kind of how we were imagining our role in musical creation.
Well, it's the interesting argument of a line like that and this album would be having with itself, because in one sense you created something, you created a piece of art, and it's out there, and now it's living through other people's lives, even just their ears or whatever. But there's also a sense that once you create something, that's you, that's living on, like, that's immortal, right? I mean, I'm gonna get heady for a second if you'll go with me.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole thing about the sounds we make, they go into space and they actually never stop. There's nothing to ever stop the sounds that we put into space. They just travel forever. And so the voices of people that have died decades ago are just still traveling through space through radio waves. You know, and here you are, you've time can't really wash this away. I've played your song on the radio. These radio waves are transmitted into space, and now in a sense you've become immortal.
I think that's really interesting, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with that times blur thing, where it's not that it's going away, it's changing. And I mean, yeah, not to get you got a little heady, and now I want to like keep going with it, but you know, I'm very much a believer in physics, and you know, knowing how one thing leads to the next, and it's this endless cycle of things, cause and effect, and even things such as that, those sound waves like you're talking about, something is being changed through that. And it's really remarkable when you think about, you know, since the beginning of time to the end, everything is a chain reaction. And you might not be able to recognize it in the form it takes, but I don't know, that's just fascinating to me. I'm not sure I have any that's leading me anywhere, but I think it's just really interesting to think about that, how every single thing you do or create might not live on in the form that you output it at, but it's gonna live on somehow.
And that's the flip, right? That's the real life ghosts right there.
Yeah,
Like in 100 years, if you know your voice is still carrying, that's your ghost. And
wow, yeah.
and is that, I mean, I don't know, you've written about the afterlife before, you know, and it's certainly hit on in these ways, I think, within this record with Long Lost. Like, where do you let your mind go with that, like considering what that is for you?
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I mean, I definitely don't think it's going to be anything I'm aware of. I think it's very much when it's over for you, it's over. But thinking about how it does, you know, your presence and the impact you've had continues on in one way or another, whether it's just pure physics or people's memories of you. I mean, I'm not a believer in supernatural stuff literally, but I think it's a very useful way of thinking of things sometimes, because there's so many things, especially internally about ourselves, that we don't understand, and we need some way to deal with them. If we can't explain them scientifically, we need some way to reconcile them, you know. And I think ghosts are one of the most beautiful things we've come up with. It's like it's such a great metaphor for what it's like to miss somebody, or to feel like they're still hanging around in your mind, or even sometimes it feels like physically. I mean, that's been a really useful concept for me in my life, I know, and almost wishing it was true. You know, it's almost like I would love that. I would love if they could haunt me. But yeah, I don't remember where that started.
Well,
But
I've said that before too. It's like, I wish that ghosts were real, because that would just that would take so much the pressure off. Like a lot of questions I think would be answered. And like you all opened up a phone line for your audience. And I was considering all of this, what we're talking about, you know, and what your audience hears from you, and maybe the type of listener that would attract, you know, folks that are real believers, you know, and are coming to you for the answers. You know, coming to someone who really doesn't believe in that, I guess, is like, that's the divide right there. Like, did you feel like you all got much of that when you open up the phone lines for questions?
yeah, definitely. And again, like I'm not judging anybody for that either. And I'm not necessarily. I guess I think it's beautiful that people come up with that stuff and that they adhere to it. I mean, as long as it's not destructive or, you know, definitely some of that thinking has led to some terrible things in the world. But in general, I think it's important that we don't forget sort of some of those early human descriptions of things. I think they're just so beautiful, and like I really love science too, and it's got a beauty um, that's unrivaled to me. But I also really appreciate these other concepts that we've come up with in the past. I think they're just so interesting, and we do get a lot of people calling in with questions related to that sort of stuff, and it's just amazing how, yeah, the response to that phone line, we kind of started as a way for people to request songs mostly, and expected to get, you know, a few calls, but it's been totally flooded to a point where our technology was unable to keep up for a little while. And most of its songs, or about half of its song requests, but then the other half is just people asking weird questions or telling weird stories. I mean, it's been really touching and a great way to keep in contact with our fans, and they're just the most lovable gang of weirdos you'd ever hope to meet. We love them.
What's it's such an interesting relationship, as a fan that you have with a piece of art, and then the projections you make about the people who create that art, and I don't know, expectations or whatever. But that's got to be, from your point of view, a dude. You're a dude, just a person,
Yeah.
and to kind of have that, I don't want to say thrust. I don't want to make this out to be it's a burden, because like you're saying, it is a beautiful relationship and everything, but that's got to be such an interesting to be the person on that side of that fence,
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it can be heavy just because you do feel a sense of, I don't know, responsibility when someone comes to you and says, so, I lost somebody who was close to me. How do I keep in contact with them? I don't have an answer to that, and it does occasionally make me feel, bad, like I'm letting them down because I don't have that answer. But most people I've interacted with have really understood when I just say, I don't know. But I wish you the best.
Well, I certainly understand. I mean, the music that you all do make, you paint these visuals even without the visuals. I mean, it's been said before, the way you all write musically, I can see those moments. I can see the landscapes. I can see what's happening within the songs. In fact, I mean, have you considered ever like graphic novel versions of these records? Is that something you all have ever talked about? Something like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're in our perfect world, we're creating like graphic novels, movies, pretty much any alternate art form version of our records as we can. Of course, that's not possible, but every record, every time around, we try to do a little bit of that if we can. There's just not enough time, unfortunately. But what's been great to see too is that people outside of the band, fans and others, have been inspired to make things based on the songs and whatnot, and that's been really interesting to see when someone feels inspired to make a painting based on one of our songs, or I've seen a couple short comics based on our songs and things. It's really cool.
Well, it is a great piece, and I think I've complimented everything except the actual music, which should have its own conversation as a part of it. Which, let me say really quickly, I will hit on that very quickly if you got a second, because
Sure.
The style of I don't know, cowboy music that sort of makes it into some of these songs. Like, were you all drawn to any specific era or artist when you were considering that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that music is sort of what our favorite stuff, or it's definitely a big part of our musical taste. This record in particular, just because of not only because of the style of music, but also just because of him as a personality. I was thinking a lot about Lee Hazlewood.
Mm-hmm.
He had such an interesting career, such a wide-ranging, varied career, and also, and to some degree anyway, I think is a little bit overlooked as an influence and as just a creator. He's kind of starting to get more of his due, I think, these days. But he definitely has some of that Western sound. I mean, he did all kinds of styles. He produced surf records and Western records and country records. So yeah, that kind of ties into the broader genre of soundtracks, which I think is another thing we think a lot about. Especially with that Western sound, thinking about Ennio Morricone and the music that appeared in Westerns of that era. Some really great stuff. And also just the cinematic quality that those, of course, engender, which we are always striving for.
I love that you said Hazelwood. I went through a bit of a Lee Hazlewood like obsession for probably
a
year or two, not too long ago. Just incredible.
Yeah,
and completely
into.
Underrated. Yeah, completely underrated. So
yeah, and just all the things he touched. I mean,
sure.
People. I guess most people are pretty familiar with the stuff he did with Nancy Sinatra, which is great. But his early hits, "The Fool," I think was his first hit with Sanford Clark singing, and just really cool how early he was in the game. And he's definitely a big inspiration for Tubbs and for sort of the idea of the Whispering Pines label.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love it. If it's Monday morning, probably my favorite Lee Hazlewood song.
Great.
Not
great
that you asked, but there it is. Since you were wondering.
Yeah, I love that song.
Ben, congratulations. Long Lost. It is for everything you all wanted it to be. I think it's all of that and more. So thank you for making this record and continuing to try and to care. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm so happy to talk to you.
All right, man. Take care. Well, hopefully we'll see you somewhere down the road sooner than later.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope to come through Louisville.
Yeah,
pay you a visit.
Yeah, please do. All right, man.
All right, man.
See ya.
Bye.
My thanks to Ben Schneider, Lord Huron. The brand new record is called Long Lost. Thanks to you again for checking out this episode, making your way to the series. Please hit the subscribe button before you get out of here to keep up with the 3 new interviews that I put out every single week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, Podchaser, YouTube for the video versions, or anywhere you get your podcast from. Subscribe to Kyle Meredith with. Then after that, head over to WFPK.org, because I do a show there Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. That's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all 3 at Kyle Meredith, and TikTok at Kyle Meredith81. Like and follow along. Make sure to say hi when you do. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.
It's easy to hear your favorite artist on WFPK from wherever you are. Listen on your smart speaker, live stream from our website at WFPK.org, from Louisville Public Media.